So the only thing science currently knows where we can influence the activation of that calm arm of the nervous system is to extend the length of our exhalation, making the out breath longer than the inhalation. And the reason that activates that calm arm of the nervous system is because we would never be able to breathe like that if our life truly was in danger.
Hello, I'm Dr Jodi Richardson, and you're listening to Well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. Hello, welcome back to Well, Hello Anxiety. Today's very special guest is Dr Libby Weaver, who many of you will lovingly know, as I do, as Dr Libby. I've been inspired by Dr Libby's work for over a decade. She's a nutritional biochemist, a 13 times best-selling author, international speaker, TED speaker, and founder of the food-based supplement range BioBlends. And these are just some of the feathers in Dr Libby's cap. What really drew me to Dr Libby's work is her warmth, her compassion, her inspiration and skill as a speaker. I've had the pleasure of seeing Dr Libby present in person, this is obviously before COVID, more than once, and the way that she genuinely delights in the complexity, awe, wonder and healing of the human body, as do I. Today, we're going to be talking about rushing women's syndrome. So this one's for you ladies, for those ladies out you who have daughters, and also for you fellas who would really love to learn more about the wonderful women in your life. So Dr. Libby, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Oh, Jodi, it's a pleasure, and thank you for that very kind introduction. I'm thrilled to be here with you.
Oh, it's just, such a joy to have this opportunity to bring your expertise to the wonderful community that is growing, ever growing with this podcast, because ever since you wrote Rushing Women's Syndrome and you did your TEDx talk on talking about cavewoman biochemistry and how really and truly there is so much that we can do to really help protect ourselves against the rush and against the modern pace of life, which has only become faster and more stressful, really, hasn't it? To be able to bring this expertise to my beautiful community is something very special. So I want to start by talking about rushing women's syndrome, which is a phrase that you coined during that really powerful TEDx talk in 2014, and I'll put the link for that in the notes. And you continue to beautifully support women all over the world through your online courses, through your books, through your social media, and through all of your products. So what was it that you were actually observing in your clinic? And this is going back probably nearly 10 years ago, isn't it? Or at least 10 years ago. What were you observing that prompted you to write the book? And really, how does that compare with what you're seeing today?
Thanks, Jodi. So, yes, I wrote the book Rushing Women's Syndrome back in 2011. So hard to believe, 11 years ago. And it was based on an emerging trend I was seeing in women's health. And so women were coming to see me as patients, and they didn't have a disease, but they were incredibly stressed. They had thyroids that weren't working as well as they once did. They had immense challenges with their reproductive system, so either with heavy, clotty, painful periods or periods that weren't showing up anymore, challenges with fertility, very debilitating transitions through perimenopause to being postmenopausal. Everything, all the symptoms were intensifying. There were women who would gain body fat the calorie equation didn't explain it, so I knew there was something else going on with their biochemistry. So essentially, lots of ill health, but not disease. And it led me I always want to get to the heart of things. There are three pillars to my work: the biochemical, the nutritional, and the emotional. And I started to look at what was going on with women's health through those three lenses. And I could see that it was the constant, relentless production of stress hormones that was essentially communicating to the woman's body that she wasn't safe. And so, because partly what happens, obviously, we have the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and the hypothalamus in the brain is forever asking, am I safe? And it looks out into the world is there oxygen? Is there food available? What's the temperature? So it's looking in a very physical sense. It also looks emotionally, of course, as well. But the hypothalamus also looks into our blood for information. And when it sees high circulating levels of adrenaline, it doesn't understand that adrenaline is there because, well, unfortunately, and I'm sure your listeners are aware of this, but caffeine leads the human body to produce adrenaline. Our perceptions of pressure and urgency lead the body to make adrenaline. And so if we look at human evolution, if we say that science suggests humans have been on the planet for somewhere between about 150,000 and 300,000 years. And if we allow that great expanse of time to be represented by a 1 kilometre walk, then the last 75 years, so since the back end of World War II, which I call the commercial era, so much has changed. But it was in that commercial era that would represent one step in that 1 kilometre walk. So in other words, it's a tiny, tiny amount of time, and yet so much has changed. Pesticides were first introduced to the food supply in the 1940s. We saw the introduction of colour television, credit cards, mobile phones, the internet, social media, and it has literally changed our stress response. So where in the past the hypothalamus saw adrenaline in our blood, it meant that our life was literally in danger. Now the adrenaline in our blood is there from either lifestyle choices or perceptions more often than not. But it's still, we haven't evolved for long enough for the body to be able to discern between the adrenaline we make when our life's in danger and when it's from an overflowing email inbox. And so that poor old hypothalamus then says to the pituitary gland in the brain, we're not safe. You need to now communicate to all the glands you're in charge of. So the pituitary then says to the thyroid, to the ovaries, to the adrenals, we're not safe, respond appropriately. So on top of that, all of that signaling then leads us to activate a part of the nervous system called the sympathetic nervous system, which keeps us in that fight or flight response. So even though that's a lot of geeky kind of science, it's basically the constant activation of the HPA axis, and it's getting false information that we're not safe. And then we get stuck in what I call sympathetic nervous system dominance. And so we stay in that stress response, and then that has an enormous ripple effect because it doesn't just happen for half a day. It's coming about because of how we now live, and so we live like it. And after a couple of years of living like that, the body then starts to give us feedback that something needs to change. So I kind of put all that together and called it rushing woman syndrome.
Yes, it's a beautiful phrase and it sums it up. And what you've just described, when I talk to, and we love the science here, so and you've done such a beautiful job as you always do of making it really clear exactly what you're describing. And we know with our anxiety that it could be and we could imagine something that is going to cause our stress response. It causes our brain to detect a threat and to switch on all of the changes that need to take place to keep us safe. And as you were just saying, it's designed to be switched on, there to be some sort of response. Could it be running from a wild animal? Could it be bunkering down away from a rival tribe, or whatever it is, getting out of the way of a car in more modern times? But it's switched on all the time. And if it doesn't settle down, as you mentioned, that we don't have that opportunity for that rest and repair, then we can see the ramifications in our physiology and in our health. And so in terms of that rest and repair, you write about, and we know that this can happen in between those times when we're activated, but also overnight. And I wonder what you might be able to tell us about the role of really restorative sleep when it comes to this rushing woman syndrome.
So the opposite arm of the sympathetic nervous system is the parasympathetic nervous system. I often refer to it as the green zone. So it's that lovely calm arm of the nervous system. And it's when we're really healthy, we can swing so easily between sympathetic activation and parasympathetic activation. But because these parts of the nervous system are part of the autonomic nervous system, we can't boss them around. So we can't just have sympathetic nervous system activation, our heart rate increases, blood pressure increases, the blood supply that's normally so fantastic to the digestive system gets diverted away from digestion to our periphery when that's happening. Sleep is enormously disrupted when we have this activation of the sympathetic nervous system, obviously because the adrenaline is saying your life's in danger, it's not safe for you to sleep deeply or restoratively. So the counterbalance to that obviously is to activate that lovely calm arm of the nervous system. But because it's part of the autonomics, we can't instruct it. We can't just say, oh, just chill out, dude. You know, you've got all that adrenaline there because you've had 3 coffees and you're overwhelmed with your email inbox overflowing and you're worried about a conversation you had 3 weeks ago. You can't just override that and say, just chill out, we're okay, we're safe. So the only thing science currently knows that where we can influence the activation of that calm arm of the nervous system is to extend the length of our exhalation. So in other words, making the out breath longer than the inhalation. And the reason that activates that calm arm of the nervous system is because we would never be able to breathe like that if our life truly was in danger. So we can have a profound impact on lowering our stress hormones and therefore improving our quality of sleep by becoming incredibly breath aware. So if we watch a little baby, they breathe in and out through their nostrils and their little belly goes up and down when they breathe. Whereas if you walk into a room full of adults, quite many of them are breathing through their mouths. It's all upper chest, and the diaphragm is barely engaged, if at all. So we're not breathing diaphragmatically. And that just perpetuates the cycle, as I'm sure many of your listeners are aware of. It just feeds the production of adrenaline. Adrenaline drives it, but then it asks the body to make even more adrenaline because that style of breathing keeps us with the sympathetic nervous system activated. So to improve our sleep quality, I encourage people to do it just before bed. So you can put your legs up the wall, or you can just sit quietly and do 20 long, slow breaths or 10 minutes of long, slow breathing. And for a lot of adults, they'll breathe between 14 and 20 times per minute, usually, and you want to get it down to 5 to 6 breaths per minute. And obviously, there's lots of little tools, and I'm sure you've shared many of them on your podcast, Jodi. You know, you can use a square and trace it with your finger. So there's so many wonderful techniques. There's plenty of apps out there as well that we can use to help slow our breathing right down. So that can be very powerful. And then but it's also, I really encourage people to not just do that just before bed. I encourage people to get rituals in their day so that they are aware of how they're breathing across each day. So if you work at a desk at a computer, you'll be able to see a clock. So every hour on the hour, do 20 long, slow breaths. Or it might be every time you might drive a lot. So every time you're stuck at red traffic lights, forget about your phone. Don't check your phone. Just do long, slow breaths for as long as you're sitting at red traffic lights. Just little rituals across the day that help you to tune into how you're breathing. And before you know it, you'll start to notice when you shift back into that upper chest breathing, and then you can re-engage and breathe slowly. And I think this is a really important point at this point in human evolution, your body responds to the information you give it. So we need to start to find ways to communicate the truth to our body, which is that we are thankfully relatively safe, and our breath and activating that calm arm of the nervous system communicates that safety and therefore supports much better sleep.
Yes, it's powerful to know the relationship between breathing, adrenaline, sleep. And we know that when it comes to anxiety, it's both a cause and an effect of anxiety, isn't it? Like you were saying, when you're filled with adrenaline because you're worrying about something you said, you're reflecting, or you're future focused on something that's coming up, and the adrenaline is coursing through our bloodstream, that we can't sleep well. But we also know we don't sleep well, we're not rested, that we are more prone to feeling anxious. And of course, we know, and it'd be really interesting for you to share how that affects our appetite. I'd love to lead into because one thing I haven't shared a lot about on the podcast is around the role of glucose when the sympathetic arm of the nervous system is activated. So I know when we get tired, we tend to reach for more fat and sugar, don't we? But also there's a lot of really interesting science around glucose and around cellulite and around body fat deposition as well.
Yeah, there is, Jodi. So I see the stress response has 3 phases, and the way we utilize our fuel, our glucose and our fat varies through those three stages. So in stage one stress, I refer to that as when adrenaline is high. And so because adrenaline is saying your life's in danger, there's all those biochemical changes I mentioned a moment ago. So blood pressure shoots up, the blood supply that's normally so fantastic at supporting digestion gets diverted away to the arms and the legs, because that's going to help us to fight the fight or get out of there. So, and 1 in 5 women in Australia and New Zealand have irritable bowel syndrome, and food plays a role in that, but so does this stress response. And then the next thing that happens is that fight or flight response that adrenaline changes the fuel that your body perceives is safe and appropriate for you to use. So in any given moment, we're always using a combination of glucose and fat. So even as, we're sitting here talking, we're both using energy, we're chatting, we're blinking, our hearts are beating, we're breathing, we're thinking. As people are listening, some people might be taking notes. So all of that uses fuel. And so right now, am I using 50% glucose and 50% fat, or is it more like 70% glucose and only 30% fat? Or am I burning right now 80% fat and 20% glucose? So it's always a percentage of each, combination of both. But when when we've got a lot of adrenaline, because adrenaline says our life is literally in danger, we need a fast burning fuel to get out of this supposed danger that we're in. And so the body will shift its preferred fuel source when we have high circulating adrenaline to be the fast burning fuel, which is glucose. So if we stay there, and that's fine momentarily, but what a lot of people do, as we said a moment ago, is they end up living like this day in, day out, year after year, and before you know it, a decade has gone past. And your body just will gradually lose the ability to use your body fat effectively as a fuel. But also on top of that, a 70 kilogram person stores about 2,500 calories of glucose. We store glucose in our body as glycogen in our liver and our muscles. And so only 2,500 calories of glucose we store. But a 70 kilogram person, that same person stores about 130,000 calories of fat. So way, way, way more. However, because glucose is our get out of danger fuel, if we live on it, as soon as that fuel tank gets below about half full, our desire for it has to be switched on, because the body's trying to save your life. It's got to make sure that that fuel tank is nice and topped up so that you have got that fuel reserve there to get out of danger if it's needed. And so a lot of people have great knowledge around minimizing their refined sugar intake, their added sugar intake, but they often can't resist it. And that there can be emotional reasons for that as well. But certainly this is a biochemical reason that's incredibly common. So that's stage one stress. Then when we're constantly producing adrenaline, one of the ramifications of that is inflammation. So both directly and indirectly, that constantly elevated adrenaline production can drive certain inflammatory markers to increase. And the body knows that inflammation is degenerative. And so that's when we move into the second stage of the stress response, and we elevate our cortisol, because one of the good things cortisol does is it's a very powerful anti-inflammatory. And so we still haven't dealt with why we're producing all the adrenaline in the first place, and so we've still got elevated adrenaline, but now we've also got elevated cortisol, and it's trying to dampen down the inflammatory effects of the adrenaline. But with elevated cortisol, because for all of human history, up until the very, very recent past, the only long-term stress humans had was when food was in short supply, so floods, famines, and wars. And again, the body has not yet learned to discern between when there's a famine and when we might be experiencing a long-term stress we have these days. We might be worried about a particular relationship or our bank balance or our health, or we might have health concerns for a loved one. To the body, it's all just the same. It's all just elevated cortisol, and that means there's no food left in the world. And so cortisol, as a result of that, is a catabolic hormone. So that means it breaks your muscles down. And the reason, and that then slows metabolism, the reason being that muscles use more fuel than body fat. So the body thinks it's doing you a big favor by slowing your metabolism down, which is going to then increase your body fat levels. And the body thinks that's a good idea because there's no food left in the world, is the information it's getting. And it wants you to still be here when the food supply gets reinstated. So it leads to a very distinct fat deposition pattern. We get fat around the middle and we grow what I lovingly call a back veranda. So we get fat. And so the cortisol thickens us up on our torso. And again, it makes sense when you think about it. If the body's getting the message that there's no food left in the world, all the organs that keep us alive, except for our brain, are all housed in our torso, and they're going to need protection and warmth and nourishment to help get them through these lean times. So, cortisol, yeah, increases our body fat in that way. It starts to mess with our body's ability to regulate our own blood glucose. It starts to disrupt how appropriate our immune response is. So, again, long term, it's highly problematic. The body can handle anything in a short burst, but what we're talking about with rushing woman syndrome is a way of life. And so it's not, we haven't just lived like it because we went through something that was very, very challenging, and then our biochemistry reverted back to the way it was before the challenging event. It comes, so much of it starts to come from I think, from our perceptions of who we perceive we need to be to maintain the approval of others. And that's where the super juicy work is, because when leading on from the utilization of fuel, and whether it's glucose or fat, another thing that will influence that are our sex hormones. And progesterone is incredibly important for so many biological functions. So yes, it's important for fertility, but it's incredibly important for us to be able to use our body fat effectively as a fuel. But it is one of the most powerful anti-anxiety agents that the body produces. It's also a diuretic, so it allows us to get rid of excess fluid. And what I'm seeing so much of now, to the point that I think I'm probably going to go back on tour and start talking about this, is as women transition through perimenopause to becoming postmenopausal, the racing hearts, the loss of sleep, the tears for reasons that they can't actually name, that is really intensifying for women. And because as they stop ovulate, we produce most of our progesterone after we ovulate. And when we stop ovulating on a regular basis, we lose the beautiful protection that's given us from all sorts of other things. So I'm really noticing that as a huge shift. So yeah, I feel very, very passionate, Jodi, about helping people to get to the heart of that, what I touched on a moment ago, that who do we have to be to maintain the approval of others? Because we rush because we care. So it comes from a really beautiful place, but we also care very much what other people think of us. And it's sometimes hard to see, and it's sometimes a little bit confronting to acknowledge, but there's a lot of beauty when we dig in there. And yeah, it's a special process to start to see that.
I agree with you. And there's a great book which I'm yet to purchase because, oh my goodness, I don't know if you can see behind me. That's just a small part of yours are on there too, not to mention your cookbooks in my kitchen. But it's called The Courage to Be Disliked.
Oh, I love it.
Oh my goodness. And just having breakfast with a friend yesterday, she was talking to me about another book called Women Don't Ask. And there are so many great thought leaders in this area, yourself included, that just really sort of getting under the symptoms and looking to the cause, because we can, and I'm in this sort of perimenopausal to, it's unclear where I'm at, to be honest. And, I say to the fellas listening that, they learn a little bit about me every time they listen in. But we got to be real. We got to talk about it, because 50% of the population will menstruate, and 50% of the population will go through this menopause where menstruation comes to an end, their reproductive years come to an end. And if for those of us that do have male partners, then or young sons, or men in our life that want to understand, I think it's equally important, because the way we are impacts on the people around us, as you so eloquently put. And I wonder, could you shed some light for us on where's a place for women who are listening and thinking, yeah, this is sounding really like coming close to home. What would you like to say to those women who are starting to sort of connect with that idea that, yes, I think this is sort of at the heart of my constant need to do more, be more, say yes. What would you say, just as sort of to get that conversation going? We've only got obviously our podcast today, and it's a big conversation, but where would you start?
Jodi, it's a beautiful question. Thank you. And I think can offer some real practical assistance for people to start to dig into this. So, the way a simple little exercise to do is to pause and ask yourself, how do I need other people to see me? And actually name the traits. So, and sometimes you can do it just in general. How do I need others to see me? Or I've found with other people, it's more useful if you actually think about a particular person. So, how do I need my mother to see me, my sister, my daughter, my boss? You can pick anybody. And then write down the traits. And for a lot of rushing women, the first few words they write down are, I need others to see me as kind, thoughtful, selfless. That's very common in rushing women. For others, it's more along the lines of, I need others to see me as competent, hardworking, efficient, conscientious. So the rush is sort of coming because they want to be seen, to be incredibly competent in a lot of areas in their life. And for some women, it's all of those things. Perfect is another word that comes out. How do you need others to say, I need them to see me as perfect? And if you get that word, you need to dig into that and see what that all represents to you, because that's another whole can of worms. And then so once you've got, it doesn't matter what your words are, you just need to know what yours are. And then the next time you do feel like you can feel that stress response kicking in, just pause and consider, am I perceiving someone is seeing me in the opposite way to how I've identified I need to be seen? And most of the time the answer will be yes. And then in that moment, if you can pause and think, can I have any flexibility in how I can handle this other person seeing me? Now, it's because when we're very rigid in, I have to be seen as kind, I can never be seen as mean. So it's like a one-sided experience of life, because no one is ever totally kind and never mean. There are, even the most selfless person will still have moments where they are selfish. So, but we identify very strongly, there are parts of our behavior that have been hugely approved of and rewarded as we've grown up. And it makes sense when you look back at the way little humans actually survive. Obviously, when other animals are born, they can survive on their own, but a human needs an adult in their world to give them food and clothing and shelter so that they can literally survive. And so our nervous system starts to link the approval of others, or you could call it love, really, the love of others. We link that in our nervous system, it's not conscious, to our survival. And then as adults, I think our body starts to wake us up to do this work, to get us to go and examine all the stories we've created about who we have to be loved, to maintain the approval of others. Our body will give us feedback about the way we eat, drink, move, think, breathe, believe, and perceive. But I think sometimes it's a really big prod to go and look at some of the beliefs we've developed about ourselves, about who we have to be, because we know that a life with love in it or approval in it as an adult is really delicious, but we can survive without it. And so developing flexibility in how we can handle others seeing us, I think, is very important. And remembering too that all of us, the people viewing us and interacting with us, we all have lenses, we all have glasses and earmuffs that we filter everything we hear through. And we don't hear what someone says, we hear what we think they meant. And if, let's say, a colleague phones you and says, where's that work? I needed it yesterday. We've heard their request for work, and that request is not in and of itself stressful. But what makes that request stressful is that we make up a story, because what we feel like we've also heard is, oh, my colleague thinks I'm lazy or inefficient, or there's all this, we perceive all of this lousy judgment coming from the colleague when they didn't ring us up and say that. We've made all of that up. And so it's becoming aware of all of the thoughts that we think that aren't true, because most of what we think isn't true. And it can really help to start to develop that flexibility in how we can handle others seeing us. When we see that that's happened, when the heart races and we're thinking, oh, oh, yeah, I can see that I really need people to see me as kind, and I'm really worried that that person, because of X, Y, and Z happened, and I'm worried they don't see me that way. The reason that's so helpful is you can either have a giggle at yourself, or you can go and have a conversation with that person. Let's say you're running late for a meeting, and that doesn't stress everybody out, but it stresses some people out. So that's how you know it's not real, because it doesn't affect everybody. And there's no right or wrong with this, but let's say you're bothered by running late, and then you can see, oh, I'm concerned that my boss thinks I don't value my job. So after the meeting that you run late for, you can go and have a conversation with your boss and say, look, I'm sorry I was late this morning. All sorts of things happened. I do my absolute best to always be on time. It's important to me that you know that I really value my job. I work as efficiently as I can. Do you really think that in that moment your boss is going to go, oh, well, that's it, you don't have a job anymore? In displaying that care and in displaying that vulnerability, it's only going to deepen the appreciation your boss has for you. So
Yes.
it can examining the traits that we need others to see in us can foster some really wonderful conversations that essentially end up giving us the reassurance that we're seeking, that the person does look upon us favorably. And it also helps to get us out of our head and all the stories we've made up about who we think we have to be.
Oh, so much of what you said is just ticking so many boxes about the way that I too think and teach around this flexibility of thinking. And it's so interesting you use that word, because in addition to my PhD, I'm trained in a behavioral therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy. And the overarching aim of acceptance and commitment therapy, which is pronounced ACT as an acronym, is psychological flexibility. And there are 6 different things that can contribute to us being flexible psychologically. And one of the things I just wanted to add to what you've just described is this idea that what happens, and you used all the words we use in ACT. We use the idea of these stories that we tell ourselves. When we can observe our thoughts, we can be aware of what we're thinking, not just swept away by them. And one of the really powerful strategies that I was just having a conversation with our son about this morning is this idea that we can really, what thoughts are, and this is just something I haven't expressed to the audience. A beautiful guest, Dr. Tamar Black, shared this idea. When we talk about thoughts, if we printed a sentence to say that I'm going to lose my job, and we cut out every letter and we jumbled them up, they'd be meaningless. Every sentence is made up of the same things, just the letters put in different orders. And just because it's a sentence in our mind doesn't make it any more true or real than if it was written on a piece of paper. And one of the strategies that I use personally as a former perfectionist, worrywart, I mean, I still have anxiety. I live with anxiety, and so I'm so passionate about it, is I'll say, I notice I'm having the thought that. So this morning, for example, before we met, I had to have a pelvic scan because I've been having some niggly kind of feelings in my abdomen, lower abdomen. And I was very, very lucky that the lovely radiographer gave me the all clear in the moment, which is so nice, because that time, isn't it, between we know scanxiety, we know all about that. I'm going to do an episode on that too. But what I was saying to myself was, because of course we go to that future catastrophic thinking. What if there's something that is going to be really difficult for me to work through and overcome? What if, what if, what if? And I just thought, I notice I'm having the thought that this could be a serious problem. And that immediately gives you that distance. And then I ask, is it helpful? These are all diffusion strategies. Is it helpful? No. What's helpful? What's helpful now is to become present and engaged in what it is that I'm doing. So so it's really interesting that you say that, and the idea of asking us to contemplate how we want to be seen is it's a really practical first step, because you shared half a dozen or so answers that you hear from women, and I probably could have ticked all of those. But interestingly, and I wonder if you see this in your work, the older I get, ironically, the busier I am, the less time I have to focus on those concerns, and the more easily I'm able to move on from them. Do you see that maturity brings more wisdom around this, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
No. I think it's curiosity to change the experience of it, and I think that can come at any age. It usually arises from suffering, which I wish it didn't. But it usually the desire to explore what's really at the heart of certain responses, I think, comes from pain. And if only it could come from, well, I think in some situations it comes from curiosity, but it's all curiosity, whether it comes from pain or just observation of ourselves, the observation of an interaction with a particular relationship that you might find challenging. Yeah, it's the desire to dig in. But I think the thing that can come with wisdom and with time on the planet is, I don't want to say caring less because it makes it sound like that's a bad thing, but it's certainly not that not having an influence on how we feel about ourselves. Because I can remember growing up, I think I probably cared about what 10 people thought of me. My parents, my best friend, German was my favorite subject, so I would have cared about what my German teacher thought. I don't know, my tennis coach would have been a boy in that mixture. But anyway, you could count them on my two hands. Whereas now people care about what thousands of people think of them, and most of them they've never even met. And it was interesting when I wrote a book in 2019 called The Invisible Load. And prior to that, I did some focus groups with people of different ages. And in the younger group, the women aged between 18 and 25, most commonly the two top stresses came out for them as their body image and social media. And when I share that with older groups, they don't understand how social media can be a stress because they use social media to see their friends' children or their grandchildren or to watch funny dog videos. It's not, and so the 35 to 55-year-old group, a common theme for them of stress was running late. And so my point is our stress can actually be our road to the most extraordinary growth because it allows us to see where we allow others to judge us. So for the 18 to 25-year-olds, social media is a stress because they're focused on what it represents for them is the likes and the comments, and they want it all to be, they want to be positive, they want who they are to be positively reinforced. Whereas when the 35 to 55-year-old group, when they worry about running late, it's still caring about what it's mostly. Sometimes you're on your way to a conference and you don't want to miss the first speaker, so it can be a bit of FOMO,
Yes.
the stress of running late. But quite often it's because you're worried what the person who's going to be on the receiving end of your running late is going to think of you. So it's the same thing. There's just different ways that plays out in the world. And so when we ask, does it dissipate a little with wisdom? No, but it changes form. And it can sometimes, I think, get a little bit trickier to see. But if we want to dig in as people who listen to your work and are involved in your work, Jodi, they're obviously here to learn. They're curious. They want to explore what's happening for them and understand themselves better and understand the people in their lives better. And so with that curiosity, I think, which can kick in at any age, I think that's the key component to start to not worry so much about what others
Yes.
think.
Yes, I think so too. And I think that this idea that the more we feel confident and comfortable in our own skin and in ourselves, that's almost like a armor's maybe not the quite word, but it does help us to deflect things, doesn't it? It is, yeah, you're nodding, yes.
Yeah, I use that word sometimes, because I've never weighed a single patient ever in my life, but weight loss has been something people have regularly come to me for my help with. When I still used to see patients one-on-one, they would come for weight loss, even though there was also, they had really debilitating periods or didn't sleep properly or had recurring migraines or whatever it was, but they'd come in really focused on their weight. So I have an online course now that supports women with that to shift their focus from their weight to their health and energy, because most people will tell you that to lose weight, most people will tell you you've got to lose weight to be healthy. I'll tell you the opposite. You've actually got to be healthy because otherwise your body's not going to let go of it. And so when I use the word armor, I do think through lifestyle choices, so through nutrition, through the biochemical changes that then arise either from our lifestyle choices or from our thoughts, and then the emotional part of my work with all the beliefs and our values and the way that we think, all of that, any of those roads can lead to an increase in armor. And it's a move. I'm a bit obsessed with authenticity, and I see that the more armor we layer on, the more we move away from who we really are. And so I love the idea, as people are comfortable and in a really gentle way, I love the idea of people feeling safe enough to remove a little layer of armor and become more and more authentic.
Oh, the other day I was preparing something and I got up before the family, sat at the kitchen bench, which is not my normal work desk, and the sunrise was stunning. So I'm in Melbourne. You're in Queensland?
Yes.
Yes. So, oh my gosh, it was just stunning, purple and pink, and then this orange came through. And I snapped a photo, and it just so happened that we'd had the funniest thing happen with our dishwasher the day before. It had been forgotten to put on, got up in the morning, went to empty it. No, the dishwasher's full. I put it on when everyone went to work and school. And then my husband came home from work, looked in the dishwasher hasn't been put on, put it on again. And so come dinner time that night, the dishwasher it's an eco cycle, so it's long and slow. Anyway, it's just like the dishes were piled up, which is not the way I like to leave the kitchen. But I took this photo across and I thought, I'm just going to put this photo up. I'm leaving the dishes. I got more comments on the fact that I'd left the dishes in the photo, and that good on you for actually and my kitchen looks like this, and thanks for keeping it real. And other people posted their pics of the sunrise that morning. But I've done that before, and I choose not to use filters on my social media, and I've got all these expression lines from all the smiles that I've experienced in my life. And more of us that can do that, we can open the door, can't we, for other people to keep it real, and to take that highlights reel away from, I mean, look, it is still a highlights reel. We want to share the good things, but if we can pepper it with the real stuff, then people are just going to relate. We're going to be more relatable, and people just feel more normal, don't they?
And then they too have permission to not always be competent or not always be selfless or whatever they're super attached to have flexibility with that and allow others to demonstrate selflessness towards them, or have others demonstrate their competencies in helping them. So we can create space for others to step into those traits that, whereas if we always fulfill them, it's not authentic, not really, and and it doesn't let others help us out.
Do the same. That's it. One of the things that I'm really fascinated to learn more about is when you talk about our experience of stress and how we can change our thinking around the experience of stress. I'd love you to talk to us about that, please.
So I think we're at a point in our society where we think our stress comes from everything outside of us. So we think it's because of that person or that situation or the family that lives in that house down the road. So we're very good at, I guess, outsourcing the source of our stress. And what we lose sight of is that it's actually our response to the person or the situation or the family in that house down the road. And a silly little example I often give is, funnily enough, Jodi, about dishes in the kitchen sink. And, sometimes you'll walk through the kitchen and there's a pile of dirty dishes there, and you might roll your eyes or giggle or just think, oh, I hope an angel deals with that for me so that they're not there in an hour. But it's, you can respond quite playfully or have no real response at all. And then other times you'll walk through a kitchen that looks exactly the same big pile of dishes, and your internal response is, I just can't keep living like this. Like, I just feel like my entire life is falling apart, and it can be sort of a straw that breaks the camel's back and throws us into a huge experience of feeling very overwhelmed. And so my point being, the dishes are the same, but our response can be very different to the dishes. And Viktor Frankl's work, I love his work. He's a psychiatrist and a Holocaust survivor. His book, Man's Search for Meaning, is profound. And despite him being amongst and witnessing some of the most horrific atrocities humanity has ever experienced, and witnessing members of his family tortured and murdered in front of him, he still had the presence of mind to share with us these words, and he wrote, between stimulus and response there's a space, and in that space is our power to choose our response, and in that response lies every single ounce of our growth and our freedom. So we actually get to choose how we respond to everything, and I mean everything, even the genuinely tough stuff. But it's becoming responsible, emotionally responsible for ourselves, and choosing to see it like that, and remembering that we can choose to see things differently. And it's not easy, and it's not partly why it's not easy to do this right now at this point in our evolution is because we actually have two thinking systems, and this is the work of Daniel Kahneman, who he's a psychologist, but he actually won the Nobel Prize for economics, interestingly. But he was the first man to identify that we have two thought systems, and I refer to them simply as our old brain and our new brain. So our old brain has been with us from the get-go, and it's a big reason why we're still here as a species. Our old brain works at lightning speed. So, but it's not conscious. We're actually not aware of what it generates, but it generates a feeling. But it's not under our conscious control. And at the moment in human evolution, it's in charge. But we have another thought system that I call new brain, and it has the ability to apply reason and logic, but it's much slower compared to old brain. But it is conscious, so we are aware of it. But right now, at this point in evolution, it's optional. So I'll give you an example of it in action. Let's say you have traveled to a city and you read the newspaper that morning that crime in the city has massively escalated, and you've gone out for dinner that night and you're walking back to your hotel room by yourself, and it's 2 a.m. in the morning, but you think, oh, it's not far, I'll scurry back to the hotel. And so you're by yourself and it's pitch black and you're in a foreign city, and then you hear footsteps behind you. You don't want your new brain to have to slowly go, oh, might be danger, better start running. Your old brain just instantly kicks in and you start running. So, and that's what you want. That's when old brain is at its best. But where these two thought systems aren't at their best is in the bright lights of a modern supermarket. So let's go there for another example. So let's say you're in the supermarket and you can see Mrs. Smith ahead of you, and Mrs. Smith not super well, but normally you'd have a bit of a chat. And what you described to me that occurs is when Mrs. Smith gets to you, she puts her head down and she walks straight past you without speaking. So in that moment, your old brain, unbeknownst to you, will generate some kind of feeling. And for most women, it will be rejection on some level. So in that moment, without there being conscious thought, you do some version of, oh, Mrs. Smith doesn't like me. I've let Mrs. Smith down. Our kids are at school together. They've probably had a fight. She thinks I'm the world's worst parent. It's not conscious. You just perceive disapproval coming from Mrs. Smith because she didn't speak to you. Your new brain could kick in if you remember to use it and go, oh, wow, Mrs. Smith looked like she had the weight of the world on her shoulders. I should make her a cake, definitely a nutritious cake, like a chocolate beetroot mud cake or something. Go around and see Mrs. Smith and check in on her and see if she's okay. Or maybe you could pause and think, wow, maybe Mrs. Smith had a big pimple on her face, or she hadn't had a shower that morning and she was really hoping not to run into anyone she knew. My point being, we can be a bit egocentric, can't we? And we think that someone's response is all about us when their response is a reflection of whatever's happening for them. Anyway, so our old brain is going to run, it's going to fire off, whether we're aware of it or not. But we have to remember that our new brain can kick in. And so I think so much of our emotional overwhelm comes from what our old brain generates and what our new brain fails to examine.
Yes.
And if we can remember that, to bring that new brain in, and a great question I think to ask is, I wonder what might be going on for them. It can just help to open our thought processes up to stop them being so focused on ourselves and question, I wonder if that person's okay.
Yes.
And that can help.
Yes. And it genuinely does completely change that story that once we open room for that, open our minds and make room for the possibility that it's not, it's not all about me. And, those of us with anxiety, honestly, when you were saying, what have I done wrong? They don't like me. And then I'll start reflecting. Now, when was the last time do I owe them a text message? Did I say I'd do something? All of that reflection in that moment. And then I'm much better equipped now because I have psychological flexibility now. And that's a big part of what this podcast is about. But my husband used to say to me, it's not all about you, Jodi. It's not all about you. Nobody actually cares that much about you, honey. Don't worry about it. in a most loving way. But it is true, isn't it, that we tend to be focused on what we're doing, and sometimes, we are, especially if I have to go to the supermarket and I've forgotten to take my Ugg boots off or something, I am in and out in a flash. And if I don't say hello, it's not about you, it's all about me. Oh, goodness. Oh, you've shed light on so many interesting ideas and insights around stress and anxiety and fuel use and beliefs and perception. And, really, I think have helped our listeners today to really think in a different way and in a new way about how they are coping, why they might not be coping, why they might be rushing. And you've given also some really practical ways to start this journey of looking inside and reflecting on, what are we making things mean when other things are coming to us from other people, and also what is it that we're looking for from others? How do we want to be perceived? And even just bringing that to a conscious level is a very beautiful step towards being able to then make some positive change. So it's just been an absolute delight. I knew it would be, and I'm very grateful. And so please tell us, now you've got an online course, a Rushing Woman Syndrome course too, don't you?
Yes, Jodi.
Could you share with our listeners where they can find you and contact you? I'll put all of it in the show notes, but how can people get in touch with you and your work?
Thank you. My website is drlibby.com, so drlobby.com. And yes, I've got all sorts of online courses there. So I have one called Overcoming Rushing Woman Syndrome. So if this conversation's resonated, that could be very helpful. I have one about detox as well. And then I have my weight loss workshops. And I'm really hoping that a little bit later this year I can travel throughout Australia and do some live events. So I'm hoping that can kick back in, because I do love being out there meeting people and speaking live. You kind of can't beat it. So but it's drlibby.com is my website.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. And what I'll do for all of you listening is I will put everything that, and references. So Dr. Libby also referenced Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, amazing. I lent my copy to my dad, actually, and I think it got lost in a move. So I must get a new copy, because it's a powerful, powerful book. And it's not a long read. It's not a long read, is it? Also Daniel Kahneman's work. I'll share all of that in the notes. So Libby, thank you again. Thank you for your time. It's just been an absolute joy to be able to talk with you and bring your beautiful warmth and wisdom to this community.
Thank you for all the joy and insight that you share, Jodi. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr Jodi Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodirichardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.